Greetings, and welcome to Beatles Stuffology, where two old friends sit around and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis, pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host, Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Well, here I lie with a shiver in my bones just thinking about the weather.
Is that a good thing?
I don't know. We're doing our Follow the Sun today, and it's a very slight song. It's a nice song, but it's a song that focuses on the weather. So I've just been having songs run around my head to do with the weather, and that's a song called Like the Weather from 10,000 Maniacs' second album. It's quite good. They're worth a listen. I do like Natalie Merchant.
Nothing wrong with a bit of 10,000 Maniacs. Let's steer clear of Crowded House, though. I still have traumatic memories from my university days of having to listen to Wooden Face, and I'm not keen to revisit them under any circumstances.
Although I will admit that my dislike of Crowded House in the first year of university was largely performative. Woodface is actually a really good album. I just found myself not liking it because I think I was being a music snob, and thought that the kind of friends that we had who did like it were know-nothing females, and now I'm the know-nothing person. So I apologise, everybody. I was wrong and being an arsehole on purpose.
Excellent, good. I'm sure literally none of our university friends listen to this, but okay, at least they'll be basking. The non-listening people will be basking in the glow of that non-apology. Lovely, right? Okay. I'll Follow the Sun. Yeah. It's rather nice. It's a rather lovely song. I really like it. I'm not all that sure how much I have to say about it, which is a bit of a problem. But yeah, it's a really lovely little song. It's a really pretty little song, and it's very nicely put together.
So I think it's a song that would have been better put out on a release, say late 62 or early 63. It's kind of got a feel of something that they could have worked up into a song that would have gone quite nicely as an accompaniment to, say, Love Me Do. It's got that sort of pleasant rhythm that feels quite sweet. There's sort of vaguely innocent lyrics, even though you could argue that they're kind of like a Paul version of some of John's you know what, I'm going to be all right, or we don't need each other kind of thing. It just feels that perhaps in 64 it is what it is, which is filler that they put in because they didn't have enough original songs. And we do know, and you know, we are nothing if not a podcast that revels in trying to find something different to say, but there are times when we have to say the obvious, and that's, you know, as far as we're aware, McCartney wrote this in 59, and there are tales of him in the house in Liverpool on the piano, etc, etc, etc. And it kind of feels like a song that someone might have written at the start of their songwriting career.
I think that's fair. Although, having said that, there is a degree of sophistication to it, which kind of belies that fairly early start. This isn't, unlike the last song we were talking about, rock and roll music, which is just a 3-chord sort of whack. There's a bit of work in this, and it's not just kind of very standard chords. There's a C add 9th, a C 7th, an F minor 6th, a D minor 7th. So there's a bit of work going into the musicality of it. It's not just as straightforward as like an EAB sort of thing. So there's a bit of work, and you can hear that. The fact that it's a very kind of pretty melody, and the fact that it's a very kind of charming instrumental. The instrumentation is very charming. I mean, you can feel those little enhancements coming through. I think you're absolutely right about saying it maybe belongs on a slightly earlier album. I can imagine it being a I mean, you mentioned "Love Me Do," but I think it feels very of a piece with something like "Till There Was You." It's that kind of ballad. It's a very traditional kind of song, and I don't mean that as a slight in any way, but the Beatles have kind of moved out of that environment now, are certainly transitioning away from that direct style. It's not to say it'll never come back, but it's definitely one of those aspects that feels of the past rather than of the future.
So I've got two things that come out of what you just said. Two things. Bingo, tick. First things first, would you be able to say which bits are 59 and which bits are 64? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay, 'cause I'm wondering if the the harmonies, that section might be more of a later addition, for example. Okay.
I would think so.
The second one, I know that McCartney has said that he considers it a ballad, but I'm trying to work out what is it that makes it a ballad. Is it just perhaps the romantic element to it, or is it the rhythm? Is it the pace?
I think the sentimentality of it leans into it being a ballad, and it has that sort of slight. I don't know if the lyric is heavy enough to be able to bear the word of the narrative, but it has a narrative feel to it, even although lyrically it's actually kind of interesting from a lyrical perspective. It's somebody who hasn't left yet, but clearly is planning on it. One day you'll look to see I've gone, for tomorrow may rain, so I'll follow the sun. But the implication is he hasn't actually gone yet, I guess. So that's kind of a slightly interesting perspective, especially from somebody.
It's that future nostalgia that we've spoken about before, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
McCartney writing about something that may happen that we might possibly regret, like on Things We Said Today.
Yes, precisely that. It's exactly the same perspective in that. And so I think that sort of narrative position kind of leans into its sort of balladry. Yeah, it's relatively slow. It's sentimental. It's very sentimental, actually, and rather wistful. And I guess those elements sort of push it into sort of ballad territory. It's maybe not 100% fit, but I think there is probably more than enough in this song to justify calling it that.
Fair enough. I mean, I would put it in the camp of songs that, on the surface, seem very sophisticated and clever, but then if you start to look at it in a little bit more depth, you realise that actually it's not. It's all surface. But that's fine. That's again, often one of my themes, isn't it? That the best lyrics are ones that sound as though they've got something to say, but don't put them under too much scrutiny because you'll remove the magic. This is very much in that camp, and that's fine. That's fine. That's what we're after. We're after something that's going to last 2 minutes, take us away from a very average cover of rock and roll music, and take us then hopefully towards something that's going to finish this side a little bit better. He said knowingly. Okay, maybe not. But it's the idea is there. And at least it doesn't have the same kind of menacing edge that a Lennon lyric would have had for the same kind of thing. We're not stalking, we're not looking through someone's window and seeing them with someone else. We're talking about a little bit of regret. Okay, I lose a friend, right? And you'll realise at some point that hey, I would have been really good to hang around with. It's not saying it's going to completely wreck our lives, or I'm going to be absolutely miserable and basically throw myself off the nearest bridge. It's nice, but that sort of thing is also very teenage poetry, isn't it? Why do nice girls hate me, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that the fact that it doesn't have that more dark edge serves the song very well. I mean, you say that it 2 minutes to get us away from whatever. If this doesn't even manage to scrape 2 minutes, it's 1 minute 48 seconds long. It's incredibly short. But I think in this case, I think that's probably the right call. I don't know that adding a bridge or a middle eight or something would add an awful lot to the song. Its charm is in its simplicity, and its brevity kind of adds to that. I think, like you said, if you dig into it too far, it kind of it cracks a little bit. But because it's so short, there isn't that much time when you're listening to it for that to occur. Whereas if it went on, I think maybe the sort of flaws in it might become more apparent. But because it's very compact, it's very short, it's fine. It goes by, and it kind of glosses over what could otherwise develop into sort of more issues for the song. So in that sense, like, its brevity is actually very much its strength.
And there are some notable things going on. I think the guitar break works really well. It's very simple, straightforward, and apparently the only take on which an electric guitar was actually played. So that's quite interesting that they threw it in. It worked, and they thought, "Yep, we're going with that." It's very much the kind of song that you can imagine slapping your thighs to, or maybe playing some spoons or forks as percussion. Which, you know what? Well, not the spoons and forks, but the slapping of the thighs turns out to be, real. But you can talk about Ringo in a moment, and the harmonies. The harmonies add to that kind of misty-eyed nostalgia, sentimentality as well. It sort of the Lennon's line underneath gives it that kind of hard-edged sense of regret. McCartney's line over the top sort of suggests that broken heart, if you like, although the lyrics don't quite say broken heart, but
it's implicit.
Yeah, the two together, in that respect, it works really, really well. Whether or not I could say any more about each of those things, I think really you've probably said about as much as you could, because it's 1 minute 50 of nice things but not great things.
I should say something nice about Ringo, given that I was critical last episode, and his thigh slapping is top tier. I don't think there's any question about that.
Nice thighs, Ringo.
Nice thighs, exactly. It's what he's known for, old thighs, Ringo. It's and I
peace and thigh.
I completely agree with the harmonies as well. I think they're lovely. Really, really effective. It's a gorgeous little guitar solo from George. Really kind of pulling out the bag on a song that didn't necessarily deserve it. I do really like the fact that it's an electric guitar as well. It stops everything becoming too twee. I think if it had been like a flamenco or like a Spanish acoustic, it would have sounded it would have been even more like something like Till There Was You, and it would have been, I think it might have been a bit cloying, but that electric guitar just helps to cut through that slightly, just gives it not an edge. That would be far too strong a word for it. But it just adds a little something without it just falling into the kind of the tweeness of a classical guitar. That's really nice. That's it. There isn't anything else on this song, is there?
Well, I mean, I do think it is worth thinking in a little bit more depth about the sun and the rain, for example,
the Madness song.
Thank you very much. I was hoping you'd pick up on that, because of course in this song it's rain and then sun. Anyway, that refrain comes up quite a lot. Tomorrow may rain, so I'll follow the sun. Now I'm interested in the fact that the first time it says for tomorrow may rain, which is a little bit more, sort of teenage poetry kind of thing. Like let's try and sound a little bit more sophisticated before we then move on to but so it's interesting how he's constructed that first verse so that it's a case of, this is why you'll see I've gone, because tomorrow may rain, so I'll follow the sun. See what I mean? It makes no sense when you think about it. It makes no sense. Although I will read you a quote from someone who tried to make sense of it, and I don't think it makes sense, but he's tried to make sense of it. But the thing about this is, it's interesting that we've got that for tomorrow and then some buts. But then actually after we have one day you'll find, we're on about the third verse. After the first, a lot of the harmony, we go back to that again. But then we get, tomorrow may rain, so I'll follow the sun. Which I think, okay, that's changing your audience a bit there, Paul. But, that's fine. Perhaps you've gone for the Till There Was You style of of approach. Here's one for the older people, but we want to throw in some of that younger language, just so we can have that appeal to everybody. I may be overreaching there, that's fine. But the whole rain and the sun thing, I think it's hilarious. I'm going to read you a quote from the book A Hard Day's Right by Steve Turner. Now, I haven't read the book. It may well be an excellent book. It has very, very good reviews on Amazon. But someone has put this quote into genius.com for this. And it says, Paul knows that stormy weather may hit his relationship, and so he makes plans to follow the sun. A selfish song in a way, because it doesn't consider how the abandoned girl might find her own sunshine. It was, nonetheless, an accurate reflection of Paul's romantic life.
Well, that's a sentence.
But I mean, it's two actually. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Okay. It's not the first person to observe that there is a degree of selfishness to this, a degree of maybe solipsism. Is that too big a word for this? I don't know. I think.
It's definitely not pathetic fallacy, which is almost what Steve seems to be suggesting, really. Pathetic fallacy, which of course is the bane of every GCSE and A-level English teacher. Possibly the most misused term by the young people of today. So, it was a dark and stormy night. Right, okay. All right, so, okay, we'll start with that, and I'll not going to get into poker again. We did that on the last episode. We're not going to raise you, but I'll add to it with this little thing. It's a newspaper headline, and then the strap that goes with it. So, Britain loved the Beatles because they sang about the weather. Headline from 2015 in the Daily Telegraph. The article's by Sarah Napton. Out of 308 songs penned by the Fab Four, by the way, penned by I love that. That's such great journalese. Fab Four as well. We can't say the Beatles again. We've used that in the headline. So of the 308 songs penned by the Fab Four, 48 brackets 16% make reference to the weather, comma, wait for it, researchers found.
I am repeating a thing I have read, but have no further justification for this fact being included.
I absolutely love the thought that she thinks this is a relevant piece of academic research. Well, it turns out it is a piece of academic research. Now, I'm not sure if you're aware, dear listener, Daily Telegraph is not a newspaper that I find myself reading unless I absolutely have to. And online, thankfully, I mean, there aren't any circumstances in which I absolutely might have to. We're
Who's forcing you to read the Daily Telegraph?
Unless you read the Daily Telegraph. I can't be bothered to create an account in order to read the rest of that article, and I think there's a paywall anyway for the Daily Telegraph, so I'm certainly not going to be reading that. However, cut to the chase, University of Reading. Is there a rhythm of the rain, an analysis of weather in popular music? So there is actually some research, and I'm pretty sure that this is the research that is being cited in that article, even though I can't see enough of the article to confirm it. But there are, but the complete list of authors, you'll like this, includes someone from the University of Southampton and Tyndall Centre for Climate Change Research, okay, Department of Physics at the University of Oxford, University of Manchester Centre for Climate Change Research and Mechanical and Aerospace Civil Engineering, University of Reading Department of Meteorology and National Centre for Atmospheric Science, which I think is really, really interesting that they presumably at a conference got together, had far too many drinks and thought, I know what we'll do. We'll basically do some research from a very, very reliable source and look at as many songs as we possibly can in which the weather gets mentioned. That's great. The very reliable source seems to be a catalogue of karaoke songs, but let's not necessarily get into that. But actually, if you think about it, what was it, 16%? It's quite a hefty number.
That's a chunk. Yeah, that's not nothing.
It is, and therefore you wonder. I wonder, because I do that kind of thing. I sit bolt upright in bed at night, wondering, did the Beatles start this craze for writing songs about the weather? It's it's quite interesting. By the way, I'm not joking about the karaoke database. By the way, they used Cara Fun due to its size, consistency, and availability of lyrics compared with alternatives. Now, in here, they're not just obviously not talking about the Beatles, but they are also, thinking about songs like "This Is a Low," for example. So it's not taking the mick. It's just saying, well, actually, it's quite interesting because we have lots and lots of international listeners. Over half our listeners in America, for example. I think only about 20% are from the United Kingdom. And if nothing else, one of the cliches about British people is we like to talk about the weather. We love phatic communication, those empty conversations about nothing, because it's so much easier to talk about the weather and how your football team did last night than it is to actually talk about something that causes you particular pain. We're just not into that. So the weather seems like a natural thing to use, whether it's just in a basic reference or as some sort of metaphor as well. But I'm sure as we go through, we will find heaps of Beatles songs, and we've probably missed a few already. There will be loads. Some of them are blatantly obvious, but it'll be fun. It'll be fun because this is a fun thing to do, and hopefully they got paid good money for this kind of research. I certainly hope so. Rain is usually used to portray the entire emotional spectrum from positive to change or simply happiness, i.e. singing in the rain. There you go. Whereas others are more cryptic, such as MacArthur Park, which compares a cake left out in the rain and its recipe with a broken romance.
And it's total bollocks.
Yeah. Or they're just words that fitted and sounded kind of nice. So, that's what we went for. But yeah, they're also, they've gone through and they've sort of looked at the various genres as well. And some they've ascribed some genres to. So it's a fun bit of it's a fun bit of research.
Yes,
there is evidence that some popular music composers were inspired by by a few very sunny days, e.g., Good Day Sunshine. So therefore, perhaps McCartney was influenced by both a sunny day and a rainy day. But it's raining in my heart. Maybe there's the Buddy Holly connection there.
Could be.
Right, okay. I think I've gone off on about that enough now. But it's worth having a look at. And I tell you what, folks, I will send JG a link to this afterwards. And for the first time in what this be about episode 55, you can find a link to it in the show notes.
That's right. Right.
With the kind of summer we've had, I have to say I can't stand the rain.
Okay, right. Well, personally, I'm only happy when it rains, but that's just my own personal proclivity, so we don't want to get into that too much. Right. Okay, let's pull this down. What do you want to give? I'll follow the sun.
Actually, no. I'm going to pause you there because we've missed something, and we've missed possibly the most fun thing about this.
Okay.
And that's cover versions.
Okay.
Because it's kind of an unusual one. Because I do want to say that you have to have a listen to the Beat Bugs episode on I'll Follow the Sun, because Jennifer Hudson does an absolutely glorious version of it where she gives it real oomph, and the notes, the vibratos all over the place, but it's great fun. But in particular, the one that really surprised me and I knew nothing about, and I kind of hope that maybe there's some listeners out there who know nothing about it as well, is the 1965 cover by one Glyn Johns, which really surprised me and really interested me as well. And there's a couple of reasons why it interested me. Firstly, on the low notes, he sounds not unlike John Cale, which is an interesting comparison to make, but it does soften as he goes for the higher notes. There's some interesting harmonising in there, not all in the same place as Lennon McCartney. There's a female voice that comes in towards the end of the verse, for example, which is quite interesting. But it's also what sounds like a really interesting... Now, I could be getting the instrument completely wrong and making a connection here that's not there, but there's a really interesting piccolo solo.
Okay. Not words you hear very often.
No, and probably will only hear once more in all of the episodes that we're going to talk about. And, I'm not saying that perhaps there's a connection there. It may well be that McCartney never listened to Glyn John's version, and that there may be Penny Lane's association with that instrument is completely coincidental. I just thought it was interesting, and I would definitely recommend that people go and have a listen to it. Normally we just take the mick out of some of the cover versions, but I think it's not necessarily brilliant, but it's interesting and definitely worth a listen. It's 5 out of 10.
That's a good reason, and thank you. I think I'm going to go slightly higher than 5 out of 10. I think I'll give it 6. It's fairly minor.
I'm being mean. I am aware that I'm being mean, especially because, I said Rock and Roll Music was a 5 out of 10. But they're both slight in their own way, and they both, even though said that this should transition you from rock and roll music towards the greatness that comes afterwards, it could have done with some more work. Here you go, Paul. Here's your advice. It needed a bit more writing.
Good. I'm sure Paul will take all of that into account when he listens to this, and will be grateful for the input that you have now given him.
Sorry, Paul.
Right. Before we offend any other Beatles, living or dead, we can probably wrap things up there.
I think we're okay to offend the dead ones, in fairness.
Well, that's true. Okay, you can really get a hold of us by email. You won't, but you can. We are BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com. We are on Twitter, /X, at Beatles_ology. We are BeatlesStuffology on Instagram, and you can find my blog at www.jgmcquarrie.scot, and Andrew's writing at www.stuffology.co.uk. Please also check out my other podcast, Talking Trek to You, where a noob and an expert go through the original series of Star Trek episode by episode. Please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcatcher you're using so that more people can find the show. Next episode, Mr. Moonlight, or words to that effect. And if you can stand to listen to either the song or the episode, we will very much enjoy what you bring to the table. We'll find a way for sure. But until then, keep listening.